Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie, and it's a beautiful morning. and I had someone ask me, PM me about what to do about overthinking, the addiction to thinking, and reacting from assumptions from the pattern of overthinking. And so here I am. And I hope everyone's doing all right. And I just would like to talk to you about the framework around how I started deciphering the patterns of my pattern of thinking, which was always in a loop of negativity and feeling very strongly about my conclusions. So today I would like to talk to you about what happens when there's a stimulus or an event and what happens to our response. And the process of surrendering to our thinking is sometimes a difficult journey, but it's actually quite simple once we understand the framework to how our patterns of thinking are established. So here I just want to talk to you about what is cognition. So cognition is our pattern of thinking, and it plays an enormous role in creating and prolonging the symptoms of trauma, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and other disorders of extreme stress. And of course, we start being very addictive to the loops and patterns of more and more thought. Everyone experiences negative thoughts, but when they become predominant and we have no ability to control them, then they create problems where problems might not exist. And so from my own experience, I was one that created a dramatization from pretty much any stimulus or event. And my specific pattern was about creating assumptions and conclusions from a certain event so I could assert myself or believe that my negative pattern and thinking was the true one. So I wanted to confirm a certain truth even out of assumptions. And, I spiritually surrendered into thinking and got more into my body, and prayer and all of these things were beautiful. And what really, really also led to me starting to understand how to witness my own thoughts without personalizing it was this specific framework around understanding my own cognition. When you understand your own cognition, you start to realize the patterns that are distorted and that are linked to trauma or just habituation of thinking. And so I would like to talk to you a little bit about these cognitive biases. Cognitive biases meaning our warped perception of our reality. There's a thing called attentional bias. So an attentional bias is a system of thinking that biases attention toward the negative stimulus in any given environment. So attentional bias would look like this. So if there is truth right here or a stimulus or an event, you choose to always view it from this angle, whether or not things are more positive and flourishing around this particular thing. You and your cognition focuses its attention in a certain negative pattern. So an example would be this. You go to a party, you just bought a new shirt, and you're very excited to go to this party with this new shirt. You feel really beautiful and sweet. You greet the host, and the host is wonderful. It's a really beautiful scene. Everyone's laughing and chatting, and then there's 10 people there. And you're properly introduced to everybody. Everyone's really, really friendly. In fact, 2 or 3 people comment positively about your shirt. And then one person who you approach in this crowd perhaps says to you, "Hey, did you get that shirt at Salvation Army?" And all of a sudden you have a freeze response. You might not be saying anything to that because you're in so much shock. And the behavioral pattern from this example is you leave the party without saying goodbye to anyone, not even the host. You go home and stuff your face with chips, and you feel sorry for yourself, and you start going into the loop of what you could have said and should have said, and how everyone's stupid, and I'm never going to a party ever again, and my shirt sucks, and I'm going to burn it. And so here is a example of your attentional bias from that stimulus or event to the conclusion of your behavioral pattern. The fact of the matter is that there were 9 other people there, but you chose to focus on that one comment and that one person. Everything was actually all right. There was beautiful opportunities to speak to other people and not to take it so personal. And it's okay if somebody doesn't like your shirt. They don't really have to like your shirt. And maybe Salvation Army for them is a good thing because they love vintage. I don't know. But what I'm drawing out here is that you specifically made an intent to attend to this stimulus negatively and create an addiction loop cycle about this certain comment. So there are other biases, such as interpretational biases, which means having selectively attend to only the negative components of the environment is the first step in this process. If I'm attending only to the negative components of my experience and I'm completely unable to experience the positive ones, then it's unsurprising that I end up interpreting my life, my relationships, and my future as unrewarding, unfulfilling, and to be avoided if at all possible. So these may be projections, right? Projections are when you attribute to others with your negative feelings, and you always draw it back to confirming a negative pattern. This also is a construct of personalizing everything. So you might interpret as everything being a reaction to you, or everything happens to you and it's always your fault, and you draw conclusions from your own interpretation that everything sucks regardless if something good or bad happens. An interpretational bias also has to do with polarization in your cognition. So basically you see everything as either black or white, and you have a hard time in basically seeing things as neutral and as they are in reality, and that there is a stimulus in its momentous moment, but you, for some reason, draw everything into the conclusion that everything is either black or white. You might have selective abstractive thinking, where you have magical thinking, where you think that things are going to happen in the way that you think they are just because you think you're thinking it. So you might have a bias where you keep maximizing things, you keep dramatizing from a stimulus. You might make things bigger and exaggerate them and create more of a story, so you can feel self-pity and, in a form, victimized. You might create minimization, right, around an interpretation where, in other words, it's denial. You might minimize your own behavioral patterns, and you might believe that you are never responsible for your experience in the stimulus. So anyway, these are just some biases that happen when we just think of our patterns of thinking. And once we draw some attention to our distortions, whether we overgeneralize and dramatize or we project our negativity onto others, it is really, it was helpful for me to start understanding how I start warping my thoughts and how they start running away with themselves, even though there was just a simple stimulus which required a simple response. So here, here's the solution that helped me, and hopefully it'll help you, is how can we start getting out of cognitive distortion is by not personalizing our thinking, but taking a responsibility in our own experience. And this is where I say to my clients, for example, pretend that you have to take your own mind to court. And when you take your own mind to court, it means that you actually have a separation from you, yourself, and your mind, and you are able to introspectively start having an engagement onto your own thinking. And if you take your own mind to court, you can ask yourself, what is fact and what is fiction? What is the story I'm starting to create around this? What are my assumptions around this topic? And here you can take your own mind to court and ask it some questions. So you can apply this to very, very simple things in your life. So for example, right, you could use this technique. For example, some guy named Daniel hasn't responded to your lovely text message in 24 hours, and you start wondering, do I like him more than he likes me? Oh my God, maybe it was the comment I made about his shirt that made him not respond back to me. Daniel is a player. Oh, I don't really want to have anything to do with him. He's all bad, da 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 da. And you start creating a story why Daniel did not text you back. Again, Daniel is a fictional character, so here's the fact. Daniel just received news that one of his family members has stage 3 cancer, and he needed some time to process and grief over that situation. So his factual thing that happened in his life had nothing to do with you at all. And so you have to question yourself, right? If you needed 48 hours of space to process a difficult situation in your life, does that mean that you stop caring for someone else? So see, this is how we start drawing things into distorted patterns. So when you take your own mind to court and you start having all or nothing thinking, magical thinking, and fortune-telling thinking, and labeling and should statements and personalizing it and making it all about you, then these are the reframing questions that really, really help me also draw back into my center and being able to surrender into all the things I can't control. And here are some questions, and if you want more information, I actually have a full course on this, but I've kind of broken it down a little bit for today. But if you would like to have this PDF for free, obviously, I can send it to you. So if you would like to dive in deeper into this very thing, I have everything written down if you want to investigate a little bit further. So when you take your own mind to court, you can ask yourself, what is my negative thought and feeling? If you have a feeling, let it run through you. Really experience it, really invite it, and really, really experience it. There are no wrong feelings. what is my type of distortion around this stimulus? You know, do I have a freeze response? Do I have a fight response? Are my thoughts going out of control in a future tense thinking and assumptions? Am I drawing conclusions based on victimization? So you can start asking yourself in this pattern, what is fact and what is fiction? You can ask yourself, if a stimulus happened already, you can ask yourself, did I have a rational response to this stimulus? And here, the answer is just yes or no. And what was the result of my behavioral response to the stimulus? Did I stuff my face with chips? Did I start yelling at my mother? Did I have a really, really bad day where I just, put everything off? I closed my curtains. Like, what were the behavioral patterns that occurred after you had the exposure to this stimulus? And what is the dramatization you formed around it? You can ask yourself, do I have an addiction to unhealthy, reminiscent response to perceived negative interactions? And is my perception of negative events a symptom of my addiction to self-pity, personalization, and victimization? Good question to ask yourself. And how do I take responsibility for events that are seemingly beyond my control? And here's the truth. You don't really have control over anything. So the whole thing really leads to, and if all of this is very, very confusing, I draw the conclusion to this, that in order to surrender to our thinking, we have to ask ourselves this question, and we have to understand that our only responsibility is our perception of all of our experiences. Our only responsibility is our perception of all our experiences. So here I invite you to get back to center. See what's around you. See what's there in the moment. And know that you can't really control much except for your own experience of your perception. I gave you some framework about reframing your cognitive behaviors, but at the end of it all, you can just really boil it down and make it very, very simple. And here I invite you to an abstract meditation form. We are not going to do it today, but if you would like to do some more abstract meditation, you can contact me. But what I recommend in this meditation, whenever you feel overwhelmed or confused, or you have overwhelming thoughts that are running away with themselves, put on some music that lets you really, really explore in your body. And you can either create an open meditation, open-eyed meditation, where you focus on something in the room, because that will let you remember that this is the moment and that this moment is all we have. What we can see is truthful, and it gets us in the moment. But as we move to the music and we focus on the stimulus or the objective truth right there, we create a malleability around this targeted attention. And what that does, it gets our thinking back into our bodies, and we start to experience the moment and get us into a transcendent state. So the way you would start this meditation, and you can use this anytime. You can actually even do this when you're in a car. Obviously, you'll have to look at the road. But, or you can do this, just got to put on some music and focus either open-eyed on something that is actually there to remind you of truth and the moment, or you can close your eyes and you can use these two fingers and just focus on a point on your body that is always there and always has contact to this solidness, your being, but you can also remind yourself of the fluidity of life and the remembrance that nothing is within your control. So if you have more questions about this very matter, I actually am open to some free discovery calls or SOS calls. If you're really, really in a place of distracted addiction thinking, or you have, any problems around overthinking, you can contact me. You can PM me. If you want more information about this subject, I have a 5-page PDF on this very matter, which is based on neuroscience. And if you just want to have a chat, and you're kind of in a sticky place with your thoughts, I am more ready to chat with you. So I hope this helped, and I hope that you are able to let go of control on your thinking and just have a natural and beautiful experience of life with stimulus and response. Thank you very much for watching. See you next week.